Who are the prospects you should be watching this spring training? What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Red Sea Radio. My name is Corbin, and thank you very much for clicking on this video. Look, we all know that the top three prospects in the Red Sox system are one way or another going to have some sort of impact on the big league club this season, right? It's what everyone's talking about right now, but what about some of the maybe not top guys? What are some of the other names in terms of prospects we should be looking at this spring as someone who could impact the 2025 Red Sox? That is what we are going to be talking about and breaking down today. And we're going to start with two of the more obvious names, and that is Richard Fitts and Luis Guerrero. Now, these are obvious names because they were both guys who impacted the big league club last year, but because they didn't get a big enough sample size, they're still considered prospects in the Red Sox system. Richard Fitts is a name to be paying attention to this spring, who very well, depending on how injuries go, could break camp with the Boston Red Sox. Now, there are a couple things to specifically pay attention to when it comes to Richard Fitts. The first is he did upgrade his pitch repertoire this offseason, and coming into the spring, he's got a pretty loaded mix right now. According to him, he has a four-seam, a two-seam, a changeup, a sweeper, a gyro, a slider, and a curveball. I guess that means he can now throw the entire kitchen sink at you. The other thing to pay attention to is the fact that he has been working on maxing out his velocity. It's something that he's always sort of been solid with. Well, if you remember back to our interviews with him this last season, he talked about the fact that his fastball was really sort of his bread and butter. Well, early on this spring already, he's already up to 97 miles an hour on that fastball. He gained some velo, adds another pitch. He could be a really interesting name to watch this spring. The big thing with him is whether or not he can get swing and miss at the big league level, because what he's done at the big league level is limit hard contact and avoid walks, and that led to a 1.74 ERA over 4 starts last year with a 3.31 FIP. Add in some swing and miss to that at the big league level, we're talking about a really solid starter. One thing I would also pay attention to with Fitts is the potential of him turning into a long reliever by the end of spring training to break camp with the team. It's something that I think we've all kind of talked about before, but something to also pay attention to. Luis Guerrero, kind of in a similar boat, right? He got some experience last year at the big league level. It was absolutely fantastic experience. Not a single earned run in 10 innings with just a 1.97 FIP. In my opinion, Luis Guerrero really does truly have the stuff to be a legitimate back-end reliever for the Red Sox. It's just simply about finding room for him, in my opinion, right? He's coming into camp kind of fighting to be that sort of one-inning either setup or closer type reliever in the Red Sox bullpen. Problem is, you've got a couple of those guys already. It's going to kind of depend on whether or not the Red Sox want to use him in potentially a lower leverage role or continue to have him work on things specifically command-wise, which looked good at the major league level, but has been shaky in the past at the minor league level in preparation for maybe later down on the season or maybe even next year. And I think that's going to be really the big determining factor as to whether or not we see Luis Guerrero this season for Boston. But I got to tell you, his spring training is off to a fantastic start as well. In his first appearance, he did not allow a hit, he allowed a walk, and then he struck out the rest of his batters faced, right? This dude has electric stuff. I'm really high on Luis Guerrero. I do think he could be a real impact player on the Sox this season. So again, another name to be paying attention to. But we know those guys. Those guys have been in a Red Sox uniform before. If you were paying attention last year, you notice and recognize those names. What about some names that maybe if you don't really pay attention to the farm system, but really do pay attention to the Sox, that you should be looking at? Well, there is Yostinson Garcia, who most of you may know as the Password. He was added to the Red Sox 40-man roster this offseason to avoid having him picked up in the Rule 5 draft. I don't know if this is really someone who's going to impact the Red Sox in the near future, but by the end of the season, it is possible that this is a name that ends up getting some buzz as to whether or not he should be affecting this team. Last year, he absolutely crushed it in minor league baseball. He had a 286 average, a 356 on base percentage, and a 536 slug for a 151 WRC+. That's 51% above league average production. It's not really in a small sample size either. It's in 107 games across a couple of different levels, as well as 23 home runs during those 107 games. This dude has got some pop. Now, a couple of things to pay attention to for him is one, put a face to the name. Right? You've heard about him. Maybe you've seen him at Winter Weekend. You haven't really seen him play baseball all that much. This is someone the Red Sox are really high on. They protected him from the Rule 5 draft as a position player, which isn't a super regular thing that happens throughout Major League Baseball. So they do believe there is legitimately something here with Yo Stinson. The second thing is you also want to be paying attention to his swing decisions. Historically, he's been a guy with a lot of swing and miss. It comes with the power approach that he has. It's just sort of been a part of his game, but also historically, he's been really good at also continuing up his on-base percentage via the walk. It's always been above 10%, except for last season, which it dipped below 10%, sitting around 8%. I think it's like 7.7. I don't have the statistic pulled up directly in front of me, but it was in that range. This spring is going to be really, really interesting to see how his decision-making unfolds at the plate. Again, maybe not a guy to be paying attention to break camp with the Red Sox, but injuries always happen, poor performances always happen, and obviously, there are times when guys just simply force themselves onto a major league roster. Yo Stinson could absolutely do any one of those things, especially as we get towards the end of the season in 2025. But I did want to put him in here because he was added to the 40-man roster, and I think we're going to see a whole lot of him this spring training. On the pitching side of things, there are some really, really interesting names that maybe haven't had some time in Major League Baseball that I think could absolutely be a part of this. The first one of those is Hunter Dobbins. Again, another name that was added to the 40-man roster during this winter to avoid the Rule 5 draft. He, like Yo Stinson, absolutely killed it in minor league baseball last year. This was between AA and AAA. He had 25 starts. He had a 3.08 ERA in those 25 starts and a 3.04 FIP to boot. To me, at least right now, this is a candidate to be a long reliever for the Red Sox. If they want to go the route of a six-man rotation, I think that's really going to fully depend on how injuries go throughout the rest of spring training. But if that's what they end up doing, the long relief role is going to be one of the more important roles on the Red Sox. Being able to bridge the gap to your late inning arms without having to totally wipe out your bullpen over the course of 6 days through that rotation is going to be vital for this team's success. And I think Hunter Dobbins could be a name to watch to take over that role. Now, again, another name we're probably going to see a lot of this spring training because of his new addition to the 40-man roster. We haven't seen him just yet, but I promise you we will. I'm not entirely sure if it's going to be as a starter or as a reliever, but the big thing to pay attention to with Dobbins is simply, again, like Richard Fitz, that swing and miss stuff. Dobbins does an excellent job of limiting walks and limiting hard contact, but his strikeout rate was slightly below 10 per 9 in minor league baseball. It was sitting in that 8-ish range. That's pretty solid, but I don't know how well that's going to translate to Major League Baseball. If he can get those numbers up this spring, I do think he's a legitimate candidate to actually pretty early on make an impact on the Boston Red Sox, especially if they're looking for that sort of long relief role and they're making Garrett Whitlock more of that versatile everyman's weapon in that bullpen. Two other names that are both prospects that maybe aren't as close to making an impact as Hunter Dobbins may be, in my opinion, are Conley Early and David Sandlin. Early is a name that's actually come up a few times already this spring as someone who's really impressed coaches and scouts in minor league camp so far. He's already hitting 97 on the gun, and he had a really good year last year. The ERA was at 3.99, but the FIP was much lower at 3.24 in 23 starts. He was missing a ton of bats, almost 12 per 9 inning at 11.98, while limiting walks and hard contact. He hasn't spent a ton of time in AA yet, which is why I'm saying he'll probably not be an immediate impact on the Red Sox. But again, you look forward into mid-August, early September, when guys are run down, when guys are injured, trying to just simply make it through a regular season. A guy like Conley Early, if he continues to progress like this, could be a name, maybe not for the rotation, but for the bullpen to be looking at this spring training. The second one, David Sandlin, pretty similar boat. Although the numbers on paper in terms of the back of the baseball card haven't exactly been successful for David Sandlin, his stuff is absolutely electric. He's almost up to 13 strikeouts per 9 inning at 12.87. Again, another guy who limits walks. His big thing is whether or not he can limit that hard contact. He pounds the zone with his pitches, but that also leads to a whole lot of really long balls being hit off of him. If he could figure out how to miss bats in terms of hard contact, not just simply whiff, this could be a really good pitcher as well in terms of especially that back end of the bullpen. So two other names in terms of pitching to pay attention to for the Sox this spring training. I'm honestly not too sure we see either of these guys a whole lot in big league camp, but with pitchers, you do get some glimpses of these guys, especially because you don't want to wear out the big league club before the major league season. Obviously, these guys may actually get some legitimate innings in major league camp this spring. And the last name I want to talk about in this video is Carlos Narvaez. And this is, again, kind of a cop-out answer because like Richard Fitts, like Luis Guerrero, he does have some major league experience, but not enough to break prospect status. To me, specifically, what sets him apart from Richard Fitts and Luis Guerrero isn't so much is this a prospect that could at some point have an impact on the Red Sox. This is more a prospect of what is his impact going to look like? It is more than likely to be that Carlos Narvaez is the Red Sox backup catcher heading into 2025. So what should we be paying attention to in spring training? Well, one, put a face to the name, right? This is a guy who came over this offseason in a trade with the Yankees. We haven't really seen him all that much in a baseball uniform, even really at all, right? I would assume a lot of you guys, if I showed you a picture of him just on the street, you wouldn't be able to name him. So Carlos Narvaez, put a face to the name, get used to him in a Red Sox uniform. Two, we got to pay attention to the defense. That's sort of the bread and butter of Carlos Narvaez. It's also sort of the bread and butter of a backup catcher, right? You want that dude to be really good defensively. That's exactly who Carlos Narvaez is. He's kind of heralded as a prospect for his defense behind the plate. It is his best quality. At the plate, that's a little bit more of a mystery, right? What's he going to look like in the batter's box? Well, last season, he did fairly well. He does have some pop in that bat, 11 home runs in 96 AAA games. Spread that out over 162 games. It's like 15 or 16 home runs. That's extremely encouraging. He does walk a lot with a 13.9% walk rate, so he's getting on base a pretty decent amount, but he does have some swing and miss in his game. Kind of a lot like Yostinson Garcia, except a little bit less power production. So there's a wide range of outcomes here for Narvaez. He could end up being one of those three true outcome guys. They could end up working on him with some decision making at the plate to sort of limit swing and miss rate. He could end up being kind of nothing at the plate, right? Because his power didn't translate over to Major League Baseball and he's still swinging and missing a lot. In my opinion, the big thing to pay attention to here is the defense. If he's not a very good bat, but he's really great defensively, he's still a very, very adequate backup catcher for the Boston Red Sox. It just makes Wong's job a little bit more spotlighted. So outside of those guys, I do think there are some names that could potentially impact the Red Sox at the big league level. I mean, obviously, we got the big three, Marcelo, Roman Anthony, Christian Campbell. We've already talked about them 100,000 times. I don't want this video to be focused on those guys. So outside of those guys, here are some names that I'm also looking for in terms of these are big seasons for them type names. I think Blaze Jordan, this is a big year for him, whether or not he's ready to take that next step and really sort of put himself into prominence in this system. You've got Nazan Zanatello, who's extremely athletic, coming off of his first full season in minor league baseball where he dealt with injuries and poor performance. How does that turnaround look? Mikey Romero, a guy who's had injuries his entire minor league career, finally healthy, put up an incredible season. Can he build on that? Conrad Kaysen, one of your draft picks last year. The news came out recently that they are definitely going to be using him as a two-way player. What does that look like in the Red Sox system? And Peyton Tolley, the now highest draft pick the Red Sox have from that 2024 draft. Huge ceiling as a pitcher. And I'm sure I missed some names in here. There are a ton of prospects in the Red Sox system. So let me know in the comment section down below, which one of these guys are you most intrigued / excited about in terms of their impact on the Sox? And is there anyone I missed? Is there anyone you're sitting there being like, I can't believe Corbin didn't mention this guy as an impact name for the Red Sox this season? Let me know all your thoughts on these potential high impact rookies in the comment section down below. As always, if you made it to the end of this video, do me a favor. Make sure you guys have hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you're new here, we talk Red Sox content almost every single day. Also, make sure you guys have hit the like button on this video as well. It just simply helps out a ton, and it's the best way to let me know you're enjoying the content. Don't forget, if you guys want to listen instead of watch these episodes, best way to do that is to head over to your favorite podcasting app and look up Red Seat Radio. Thank you all very much for clicking on this one, and I will see you in the Red Seats.